Welcome back to Journalist Roundtable. I'm Ken Davey, your host. Joining me tonight are Allison St. John from KPBS and Logan Jenkins from UT San Diego. Our next guest is the man who has reshaped North County Transit District and turned around its perilous financial path. But the train has stalled quite literally with a need to repair the brakes on the Sprinter. Mr. Matt Tucker, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Mr. Tucker, this must have been very difficult for you. The very day that your 5th anniversary comes around, you had to shut down the Sprinter line. And we had an investigative study at KPBS that just came out this week that suggested that the budget for fixing things like the brakes, the maintenance budget for that train, was actually being spent in other ways on things like reports called public benefit study, capital expenditure budget. There was no maintenance budget. How do you justify that?
Well, I think first, in terms of the Sprinter shutdown, NCTD's focus has to be first on taking care of our customers, and I think we've done a good job of taking care of our customers and making sure they're able to get to jobs, get to work, get to medical appointments. That's the focus for the agency in getting the Sprinter back up and running as quickly and safely as possible. In terms of the KPBS article, I will tell you, highly disappointed in the level of inaccuracy. If you take a step back and you use just a basic level of logic, NCTD is in the best financial position it's ever been in. We have a 5-year balanced budget. We're in fiscal year 13. We have a $5.5 million contingency that's available to us that's been untapped. We've had 2 of the highest capital budgets in the history of the agency outside of the Sprinter construction of $27 million back-to-back years. The notion that somehow we would divert maintenance for trains is just utterly ridiculous.
Okay, so may I just ask you, is this true that the person who was responsible for maintenance actually asked for money to do some work on the brakes, which apparently was known that there was a problem with the brakes, and was told there was no money in the budget?
Totally 100% incorrect. When you look at what is identified in the KPBS article, you talk about a drive system overhaul. I don't think anyone would expect a vehicle with a 25-year life to need a drive system overhaul replacement within the first 2 years. The problem that occurred that resulted in the Sprinter shutdown is simple rotors. It's an item that you would never do an overhaul to replace. You would have ordered the parts. If you clearly just read the comments from the employee that was involved, the former employee, he clearly stated that he inquired informally to purchase those rotors, and he independently decided it was too expensive. The notion that somehow we would make that kind of decision, that a bunch of managers would get together and say, you know what, we don't want to spend $200,000. We would rather shut down the Sprinter. It's just not logical.
And I just want to follow up with one question here, which is that this is a company that does the maintenance on the trains, right?
Yeah,
so you subcontract.
We subcontract with a company.
So under those circumstances, always the important thing is the oversight and what NTC oversight is like. How come the oversight didn't catch this in time? Because this is such an embarrassing event to have to shut it down.
Yes, think about it. That we had over 50 inspection of the California Public Utilities Commission at the same time that didn't catch this. This is almost like what you would see in the private sector banking, almost like fraud, because you would go and look at an inspection report, and there was no notation that there was a defect. I mean, simply put, if the forms had been properly completed, you would have identified a defect, you would have ordered a part, and guess what? That part would have been delivered.
Well, you mentioned the word fraud. Who's defrauded whom?
Well, the notion of it is that the folks who are inspecting the vehicles are responsible for accurately completing the report. If you take your car in, Logan, for service, you expect those folks that look under the hood, that look at your brakes, to actually write down exactly what they saw in an accurate manner. That way you could make a conscious decision on whether or not you want to pay for that repair of that part. We were never afforded that opportunity. There's no dispute in anything, because all of the documents are actually available out there for the public to see, that there's no inspection report that identified premature wear or ordered replacement parts.
So is there any legal remedy as far as NCTD goes,
well,
if you've been defrauded?
Well, here I use the word fraud just just sort of describe what happened. But from a contractual point of view, we have a relationship with the vendors, and there are remedies that are in place for NCTD to address the impacts of the Sprinter being shut down.
Mr. Tucker, for our viewers who may not have followed this closely enough to understand, tell us what happened to the rotors. What's wrong with the rotors?
Well, the rotors, just like if you think about your rotors in your car, they all have a wear limit. These rotors are not only reached but exceeded their wear limit. Now, I guess the key piece of understanding was that the expectation was that these rotors would not fail until the wheels needed to be replaced. So you would be talking about a maintenance program that would be happening between 10 months to 15 months from now, not now. As Mr. Burke has identified, they saw the premature wear almost 3 years ago, and that he was exploring solutions. And the right thing to do 3 years ago was to order a new solution that would replace the existing rotor to keep it in operational manner.
How much time and work is necessary to get the Sprinter back running?
Well, that's probably where we're putting all of our attention. This weekend, we're actually going to be conducting testing. We have received a replacement part, and we're in the process of installing it today. And we've put out a public notice to let people know that we will be testing the solution over this weekend. Once those tests are completed, we're going to announce the official date that we believe the Sprinter will be back in full operations.
Do you use the same parts that you have in?
No, this is a different part.
Okay.
So who is actually going to be covering the costs of both the maintenance and the layoffs? All the cost of having to shut the train line down?
Well, that's going to be something that we'll be discussing between NCTD and our vendor, and we'll work through those issues. Right now, all parties have worked really, really closely on getting the Sprinter back in operations. What we've all sort of agreed is at this moment in time that the priority is taking care of customers and getting the Sprinter service restored as quickly as possible. We recognize there will be time to sort out the bills.
One of the things that I know Logan has written about is that actually the Sprinter was extremely expensive, and it might have been more cost effective just to go with a lot of buses. Now, it does seem like some of the money that, according to this investigation, the money that should have gone to the maintenance was going into looking into how to expand the bus service. Do you believe that actually buses would be more effective in North County?
First, let me just go back and say that literally almost every paragraph in that PBS article is factually incorrect. It's not a good basis to talk about facts. Now, as it relates to Logan's wonderful article, I love Logan's writing.
Could you repeat that?
I love his writing. I will tell you, we did a presentation today at our board because there was an article that was printed that operating the bus service would be half the cost. We produced a financial analysis and report to our board today, and we're emailing it out throughout to all of our key stakeholders. The cost of operating the bus service that is temporary bus replacement, that is not intended to mimic what the Sprinter can do, is actually $200,000 more over a 34-day period. Even beyond that, the subsidy required per rider, it goes from about $2 and some change for the Sprinter to $10 and some change. And even worse is that the ridership is down significantly. On a typical March month and on the Sprinter, we would carry 250-something thousand per people.
Now, ridership is down on the temporary bus replacements or on the bus system overall?
No, essentially the replacement service that we put in place for the Sprinter.
All right.
So we've actually had the test of the real life experience to be able to report back that it actually costs us more to operate a level of bus service that is far below the quality of service that we can.
But you have a reduced ridership, don't you, than what you might expect with this temporary service? Correct?
Well, and part of that is because the bus ride is nowhere near as convenient, and offers the amenities that you get from riding the Sprinter. And so from a lot of different perspectives, it sort of validates the wise investment that the region has made, and it's sort of one of these issues that the Sprinter is going to pay benefits today and going forwards in the future. And one of the things that we have to sort of all recognize, we're going to live differently in the future. You know, Logan referenced conversations that he had with folks in 1975, and I said to myself, I think I was 6 or 7 at that time. And I think about
Are you telling me that I'm old?
No, I'm saying you're cool. I just I think about the generations that are going to college today. They're looking to live life in a different way than what we've than we've traditionally lived.
Prior to the shutdown, has the Sprinter ridership done what you guys anticipated it should or would?
Yeah, and let's get it from the perspective of a guy who wasn't here for a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears of getting it there. When you look at the ridership adjusted for what happened with the Great Recession and what was actually built, we actually exceed the estimates. And then if you look at what has happened over the last few years as we've been able to improve our overall bus system and really start taking this service and making it better match what the community expects, the ridership has been going up and up and up. And quite frankly, we have the next evolution to make is sort of giving people a express service that sort of will help compete even more against the traffic that's on the 78. So the Sprinter has not necessarily yet hit its stride. We still have more options to add public benefit for the region. And I think as we bring the Sprinter back online, you're going to hear lots of talks about things that we're ready to move forward with that's going to be a real change, a game changer for riding on the 78 corridor.
Matt, could you address the turnover at NCTD among the management? You know, I know that when something like this happens, you go from a fiesta to a fiasco. You know, the long knives come out, but it is true, isn't it, that you've had a lot of turnover?
Well, it depends on what you describe as turnover. If you consider the fact that when I arrived at the agency, the staffing was budgeted at about 550 employees, and in the course of us privatizing, we dropped down to about 106 employees. So when someone then talks about the fact that 20 managers have gone over that period of time, what is the context of saying that there's something disruptive going on? If you transition essentially the lion's share of the jobs out, both management and frontline workers are going to be impacted. So if the story sort of fails to put it in the context that you had a large level of attrition that transitioned from public employment to private employment, and some folks, quite frankly, retired. But yes, I mean, I think when you talk about it, there has been significant change, but I don't think it's that hard to believe 25 managers or 20 managers, I don't know the number, would have transitioned when you went from 550 employees to 106.
So you don't run the kind of workplace that people might sort of get, there might be a lot of churn.
No, I think, quite frankly, NCTD, if you sort of think about the fact of how we're transitioning to a business model, more so of a contracting and oversight agency, you would have that kind of transition. But think about it, when we operated the bus system, you had a lot of managers whose sole focus was directing the day-to-day services for bus. And so if you contract that out, that management structure will no longer exist. And so things will have to change if your business model changes.
So a quick question about that. It turns out that you have had a lot of changes in management and in oversight, and it may have had something to do with the problems. But looking forward, do you feel you've got the management structure sorted out?
I have to challenge the premise. This had nothing to do with the problem with the Sprinter. And we have to continue to move people off that notion there's no relationship.
With that, thank you very much, Mr. Tucker. Stay with us next month. We'll have another good show, I believe. Thank you very much, Logan Jenkins, UT San Diego, Allison St. John, KPBS.
To obtain a VHS or DVD copy of this program, contact KOCT. Proceeds from these sales will go to the creation of additional quality community television programs.